Well, before I sit down, can you hear me? Okay, and you'll hear me more when I sit down. I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to look around the room because what an incredible community has gathered here tonight. I know a little bit about some of you, some I've connected with on Facebook, actually, the great unifier, and I hope to know more about you and some of your work because there will be a Q&A, time for Q&A afterward. And that isn't just questions. That isn't just questions for me. We also want to draw out some of the wisdom that's accumulated in this room because I am Buddhist. This is not a specifically Buddhist talk, but in my understanding of the Buddhist path, when a group of folks gathers together, it is always a special occasion. And that is because there are opportunities that are inherent in our paths crossing in this manner that are very specific to this time and this place. And even, I always say when I teach, even if this exact group of people, folks with your names and social security numbers, gathered together, if we gathered together, say, a year from now in this room, we would not be the same people, and this would not be the same place. Because everything is always in a process of change. So let's treasure this moment of being together in community. And we will be doing some community building. We'll be doing some interactive mindfulness work in this evening on mindfulness, self-care, and social change. So I'm going to talk for maybe around 45 minutes, then we'll have time for Q&A. And I'll just start out by putting out the 3 words from the title of this talk. So mindfulness, and I'd just like you to become aware of what comes into your thoughts and feelings when you hear that word. There's no right or wrong. This is not a quiz. It's just asking you to look at what comes into you, if nothing at all. If you have never heard of mindfulness, that's fine. So mindfulness. And self-care. What comes into your field of consciousness when you hear the word self-care? So as a community activist, I can tell you that when I started hearing more about self-care, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, I was just incredibly joyful because I had been through so many situations where the ethic was, let's martyr ourselves for the cause. The harder we can work and the longer, if we could just pour those hours in and work and work and work and work, and the most exhausted person was kind of elevated, that they never stopped. Their children hadn't seen them in a long time. You know, they hadn't eaten, they'd skip meals. And then it was like, at least in the circles I was in, this dawn of sanity. Sanity dawned, and people began talking about sustainability and self-care and the ability to be joyful in our work, which in areas of social change. So that's our next word, social change. So those of us working for social change in any way, as John had mentioned, anything that you're doing to help change some of the embedded systemic toxins and the systems of oppression that we all suffer from. We all suffer from, and some of us feel that impact more than others. Anything that we're doing to make that lighter, to be able to experience more well-being and more happiness, that to me is what can create the movement that will have the most potential for good. So I do want to, again, acknowledge those of us who are here tonight are working hard. We're working hard to address and to remedy some of the most entrenched and toxic forms of systemic suffering in our society and in the world. So for those of you here, you know which areas that you're working in and that you're active in. And I hope that you, that during the Q&A, maybe we'll draw up more of the areas people are active in. And let's just also have faith, because we can look around and see what good folks are here tonight, that we're all in this struggle, and it is a struggle, I think. So I would like to just invite us to start out by, let's thank ourselves and each other for doing what we do. And whether or not you know the folks around you, I'm going to invite you, if you like, to turn to people around you and say, thank you. I'm grateful for your work for social change. Just extending that faith that we're all here. So thank you. I love to feel that feeling of energy and connection happening. So now that we've thanked each other, second of all, let's just name that and let's put it on the table in a matter-of-fact way. And please, I'm just inviting you, let's ask ourselves, am I in this for the long haul? Am I committed to working over my lifetime? I just turned 60 this year, so I don't know how long I have left. I'm kind of in some version of the end zone, but that could be a long end zone or a short end zone. Could be pleasant or unpleasant. And for those of us who are younger, still don't know. So ask myself, am I committed to working over my lifetime for justice, for equity, for peace, and for healing on issues that embody injustice, non-equality, violence, and brokenness or dis-ease? And then to ask ourselves, and if I am committed to working over my lifetime for these things, how long will my lifetime be? I'm in the midst of co-teaching a class series at East Bain Meditation Center in Oakland called Facing Death Compassionately. And there are several people in this class who are who have terminal illness, and there are others who are caregivers for their friends, their members of their family who have terminal illness or who are very, very ill. So that subject is on my mind, and as a Buddhist, it's one of the great contemplations is that impermanence, is that things will change. And just as I was born at a certain point and I've lived for a certain amount of time, I'm not going to, thank goodness, be here in perpetuity. I remember when our beloved cat was dying of kidney failure, and I thought that my son would just be devastated. So he was raised in a Buddhist household, and he just kind of wasn't. And I knew he loved that cat so dearly. And I said, I thought you would actually be kind of devastated. And he said, no, not really. He said, can you imagine an immortal cat? I had never thought of that. I thought of this cat that would just get older and crankier, and she was already very bossy and domineering, and just be this immortal cat. Had never occurred to me. So there is that side of it. So inviting us to just contemplate, how long will my lifetime be? So we don't know, but just contemplating that. And how many breaths will I take? How aware are we that those number of breaths are finite? And because we are people who care enough about the world to do the work that we do we also care enough to care for ourselves? Do we care enough to care for ourselves? So I'm just going to ask you, if you like, for a show of hands, how many of you have known activists and change agents who have burned out? If you like, take a look around. Yes. So you notice I'm not asking whether you're one of those people, so you don't have to disclose. But you can see that it's definitely a huge issue, and it's one that these practices of mindful awareness, of mindfulness, which means a spacious, non-judgmental, very keenly observant awareness of what's happening in our bodies, in our thoughts, in our emotions, and in the world around us, and these are practices to cultivate this quality of mindfulness, can definitely help us with. So now I'm going to invite you to just kind of take a moment, look within, and you're not going to have to say what you see to anyone else, so that should cut down on any potential embarrassment factor, or maybe the news will be great, and just to ask yourself, how am I doing with self-care? And the answer might be, well, for the moment, not so great. It could be sort of okay. And it might even be superbly, which of course I hope is the case, and so often, for many, many different reasons, not. So just that's already beginning to have the intention to be mindful about how well we're taking care of ourselves. So at this point, I would like to invite you, there's been a handout, which is the Great Vow to Not Burn Out, the Great Vow for Mindful Activists. And I brought it along because I thought we could have some fun with it, I hope. And as John was saying, I'm now in the second year-long program of a program called Practice in Transformative Action. We use the acronym PITA, like pita bread. And this is a year-long program at the East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland where I teach. It is mindfulness practices for agents of change and for social justice activists to learn so that they can go forth and share them freely with others. It's not a teacher certification program. My way is the way of everyday life, and the skillfulness resides in the humility and the creativity and the appropriateness with which we can help others to become more mindful, to practice mindfulness, only if they wish to do so, and also how we can live mindfully ourselves, because that's actually the greatest way to spread mindfulness in all of its imperfect qualities. So here's a great vow for mindful activists, and when people have started this program, what I've asked them to do is to take the vow. I asked them to start out by taking a vow and to also look at their feelings, that if they don't want to do it, what the reasons for that might be. So this is one very powerful place where mindful awareness can begin. In asking ourselves, we can word it any way we like, we're not stuck on this, but asking ourselves, am I willing to take a vow to not burn out? And if you're like me, the word vow has a certain sacred quality to it. It's a substantial word. It's a word that implies commitment. Now, we can't always fulfill all of our promises perfectly, and sometimes conditions change. Yet, a vow or a great and burning question can be what guides our development, what helps us to go, as they say, out of our own boxes and leads us into areas of challenge or even areas of connection that are delightful in ways that we never knew, that takes us into the unknown, in other words, because we have that strength of the vow. And many of you probably know, and I didn't know it would be here, but it was included in the slideshow that was up when you first came in, the famous quote by Audre Lorde, which says that caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. So I invite you to think, what comes up for you when you hear self-preservation? So caring for myself is not an act of indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. That is an act of political warfare. So here we see that the context of this very, very famous quote comes with a richness of history and a very vivid comprehension and presentation of the dynamics of power, of privilege, of oppression, and how they have worked in the United States, as well as played out in their own ways in nations and cultures around the world. And highlights that for people who have been in groups that have historically and also today have been targeted for oppression, that caring for ourselves in this case is should be our primary goal. For those of us who work with young people, with children who are parents, who are grandparents, aunts, uncles, elders, anyone who's younger than a tiny child, and who's connected to children, as I am through being a mother and through having been a volunteer in the Oakland Public Schools for, I think, 11 out of 13 years that my kid was going through the schools K through 12. We know, at least in part, the gravity of the situations that we're dealing with, and then to make that leap into a commitment and a practice of mindful self-care is one of the most primary and important and significant commitments that I feel that we can make, and sometimes for many reasons it is the hardest. So each of you, with your lifetime of hard-won experience, is a resource and a treasure. So I'm just going to kind of stare at you, and if you don't feel it already, I'll repeat it, each of you to me is a resource. You're a community resource. You're a resource for your community and your youth and your children and your peers and your elders. You're a resource, and you're also a treasure that we want to preserve and uplift and not burn out. So I'm going to invite you to take a look at the Great Vow for Mindful Activists. And I brought it with me tonight to just ask in a playful and experimental way how you might feel about taking the vow. And before we do that, I'm going to just pull back and stop for a moment and say that our attitude in working with mindfulness and social change is to have a certain lightness in it. We want to bring a certain lightness in it to it because we need to. That doesn't mean that we don't take it seriously. It's the lightness of extreme seriousness, I would say, right? That helps us with self-care and with preservation. Because the more we can invite the energy of joy and connectivity and happiness into our lives in ways that enhance our well-being and our own healing, the more easily the work goes, the more sustainable it becomes. So I'm going to invite you now to just experience, we're just going to do something a little experiential to show what our attitude, a little embodiment of what our attitude is in mindfulness practices, in which we're placing our attention on, it might be the breath, it might be sensations of the body, it might be the sensations of the body when walking, it could be mindfulness as we're washing our hands after we go to the bathroom or when we do dishes. Mindfulness is always mindful awareness of something. And we need to know what kind of attitude we're bringing to it to be more successful in our practice of mindfulness, for it to really yield its fruits to us. So this is something that I think is helpful, and if you like, put out one hand. It doesn't matter which one. And then we're just taking the other one and resting it lightly on top. So I invite you to close your eyes. If you don't feel safe doing that, just keep them open a little bit, but we're going inward. Relax the body and feel the contact between those hands. Now we're not pressing down, and neither are we lifting up so that there is no contact. Just feel that very light contact. Feel the warmth of it. That's the energy in your body. That's the life energy. Feel the relationship between the hands. And we're trying, if possible, to generate an attitude of friendliness and warmth and kindness towards ourselves. For some of us, that may be more difficult. For some of us, it may be impossible, but we're just beginning to incline the mind. So this is called, we're just planting some seeds. We're planting some suggestions. We're going to consider an attitude of lightness, of kindness, and feeling that connection. That connection of placing our attention mindfully, lightly, yet with that warmth on self-care and self-healing. So we're setting our direction, we're setting our intention. So thank you for that. And I'd like now to just go one step further and ask if there is anyone here who would be willing to come up and read the vow aloud, and insert your own name. You don't even, I'll make it easy and say you don't even need to have to take the vow. You just be willing to read it aloud, slowly and experimentally, and just see how it feels. Maybe someone who I would invite who's been under a lot of stress, maybe that's all of us, recently, to just see how it feels. To promise, to make a commitment to not burn out. Okay, I think we have, is there a handheld mic? Please come on up and tell us your name and stand in the light, because we want to get to know you.
Hello, I'm Sean Harris. I moved here from Chicago, Illinois. Actually, I was born here in San Diego. I moved here from Chicago, Illinois in 2006, so I never thought I'd come back to this place, you know, and
here you are.
Here I am, yeah.
Here you are. Okay, well, there's a spot for your name, and
Okay.
Let's see how it feels to you. Read it for us, please.
I, Sean Harris, am working to create a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. I promise, for the benefit of all, to practice self-care, mindfulness, healing, and joy. I vow not to burn out.
So thank you, Sean. How did that feel to you?
It was impactful.
Okay.
Yeah.
In what way? Yeah, just share with us.
To me, it was like an eye-opener, you know? Mm-hmm. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. A hand for Sean. Is there anyone else? So this is interactive. We're spending time together. We're being in community. We've got the handheld mic. We want to hear you. Is there anyone else who had any feeling to the great vow of the mindful activists, vowing to not burn out? Because I know there's sometimes little voices in my head, if I'm honest, that say, no, no. And then I think, am I crazy? Do I want to burn out? But really, resistance does arise. So please tell us about yourself.
My name is Raven Armelin.
Could you use the mic?
Yes, I can. My name is Raven Armelin, and I have been under a lot of stress, and it has affected me in a way that I am not comfortable with. So.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to take the great vow to not burn out?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do it.
Aware of suffering and injustice, I, Raven Armelin, am working to create a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. I promise, for the benefit of all, to practice self-care, mindfulness, healing, and joy.
And how do you feel about that? You could be really honest. Some people might say, well, I don't like this.
I liked it very much, and it felt as though there was a great weight being lifted off the top of my head, and my head is a very special place for me.
Yeah. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I personally am glad you vowed to not burn out. Thank you. So we're already doing a mindfulness practice. And you notice that we haven't had to contort ourselves into strange postures of meditation and sit around for hours and hours getting really bored and thirsty and other things that happen when you meditate. I can say that because I've done monastic practice. And there also are benefits. But just to kind of demystify it and say we're already doing a mindfulness practice, and maybe one of the deepest that we can do, because we've checked in with ourselves to see how we're doing with self-care. You remember you did a little self-assessment on that. And now we might be aware of other feelings about the vow to not burn out, which could be things like, hell yeah, I don't want to burn out. Or it could be, if I'm honest, I actually like overworking and martyring myself for the cause. Or it could be, I'm not there yet, and I'd like to be. And all of these responses and many more are completely okay. Because basic mindfulness isn't about being calm, sorry about that, or blissful, or the worst adjective of them all. It's not about being Zen, meaning unnaturally serene, with like blood pressure of 130 over 80 and a very clean house. Which is kind of what, in American popular cultures, the word Zen seems to kind of mean interior decoration or someone who's really annoyingly calm. And it isn't. It's a sect of Buddhism, and it has a very long and wonderful cultural history and a history of great practitioners. So mindfulness isn't actually about being calm or blissful, and it's also not about those things, because basic mindfulness simply sees what is there. So as you can see from there that it doesn't need to be necessarily taken in any particular religious or spiritual context, and yet it definitely has that trajectory. It has the implication that it can go far beyond stress reduction into the realm of the spiritual as you experience it and as it unfolds for you within your own tradition, from your own culture, from your own background, because I know that there are folks here tonight with very rich spiritual context and backgrounds and living practices. So basic mindfulness simply sees what is there. It's like a light. It's like if we had a flashlight and we went into a darkened room and we simply began casting that flashlight around and noting what we see, almost in a neutral way, so that we don't get excited over some things we see and we don't ignore other things we see. We're actually practicing, and this is a practice, to see everything in a very equal, fair way, and to see everything that is there, as much of it as we can see. We see things that we think are good. We see things that we think are bad. We see things that we think are neither good nor bad, that we like, that we dislike, that we neither like or dislike. And we're seeing all of it in a way that increases our knowledge and brings with us the wisdom that comes through greater inclusivity. Through greater inclusivity. So you're being mindful when you can slow down, even for a couple of extra seconds, and simply observe. See honestly and with great clarity what's going on in your body, in your thoughts, in your emotions, and what is happening around you that you perceive. And we haven't meditated for hours right now, and that's okay, because we're paying attention to being mindful. And we're also paying attention to setting an intention, because unless we have an intention or purpose or a direction, how do we know whether we fulfilled it or not? In other words, unless we have a strong intention for social change and an idea of our goal, what we want it to look and feel like, how do we know if we're getting there? Instead of just running around trying to put out fires all the time. And this is something that in my own practice of mindfulness, I do administration work, working with volunteers and in communications at the Meditation Center, East Bay Meditation Center in Oakland. I'm also a core teacher there, so I'm teaching classes, workshops, day-long retreats on a wide variety of topics, Buddhist as well as secularized mindfulness, and some other topics as well, such as using mindfulness-based strategies to deal with depression and anxiety, which are very widespread in our society. And sometimes I lose my focus, I lose my ability to kind of know where I'm going, and in that case, I'm just stressed, and I'm running around trying to put out a fire here, and there's a problem there, and then there's a problem there, and maybe my car breaks down because it's really old, and then I'm obsessed with that. And it's not that those things don't need attention, but what is the context in which I'm doing it, and how clear am I on what my priorities are, and what the overall importance and relative importance of things are. Overall, in terms of relative importance, when I look clearly some things I'm upset about just aren't that big a deal. Really, I just have to say, I was upset about it. Really, it isn't that big a deal. And other things that I may not be paying so much attention to in that frenzy are being lost when they're actually, when I clarify what is most important to me. I've worked a lot with children, and a story that I often tell when I'm teaching is how years ago when my son was young, my nephew was with us on a hike up in the Oakland-Berkeley Hills. And he and I have always had a really strong heart connection. I think he would probably have been around maybe 7 or 8 years old, maybe around 10. And so we were walking along, and frankly, I was so exhausted that the one thought in my mind was, well, maybe this hike will keep the kids occupied enough that no one will talk to me, and I'll just be able to take a walk and have some time to myself. And that actually was kind of what was going on for me. And so my nephew was talking to me, and he was telling me all about his life, and I was saying things like, yeah, oh, yeah, okay, I wasn't listening to anything he was saying. I was just making these sounds, hoping that he would kind of buy it, or be polite enough to pretend. And he suddenly leaped ahead of me on the path. He made me come to a full stop. He gave me full eye contact, and he said, I am desperately trying to have a conversation with you. So I was totally busted. I was. And the only thing I could do was admit it. And I said, you're entirely right. I have not been paying attention to you. I have not been listening to you whatsoever because I'm exhausted. And I know that I don't see you that often. I absolutely want to hear what you were telling me. I am sorry. I apologize. Let's start over again. Please tell me what's going on for you. And then we continued the hike in this very amiable fashion. So we can ask ourselves how we're doing with self-care, how we're doing with not burning out. And remember, there's actually no right answer. There's either observing a thought, an emotion, a physical sensation, or not observing it. It's really as simple as that. We're either mindful of something that's going on for us, or we're not mindful of it because we're distracted, we're ignoring it, we're racing around, we're going too fast, we've deprioritized it. So there's the two things. We're mindful or we're not mindful. And that's why I think that we really need to nail down why we need mindfulness and self-care. Another famous quote, this time by Thomas Merton, which many of you may be aware of, and which I read from time to time for myself, says, there is a pervasive form of contemporary violence to which the idealist most easily succumbs: activism and overwork. So he calls this a pervasive form of contemporary violence. The rush and pressure of modern life are a form, perhaps the most common form of its innate violence. To allow oneself to be carried away by a multitude of conflicting concerns, to surrender to too many demands, to commit oneself to too many projects, to want to help everyone in everything is to succumb to violence. So that's something we're thinking about, that in one way it can be held up that it's very noble and worthwhile to want to help everyone in everything. Mostly I think when we think that way, at least for myself, then I get left out of it and I start to burn out. Thomas Merton goes on to say, the frenzy of our activism neutralizes our work for peace. It destroys our own inner capacity for peace. It destroys the fruitfulness of our own work because it kills the root of inner wisdom, which makes work fruitful. So we want to develop and not destroy our own inner capacity for peace. And notice the word capacity, that we each do have an inner capacity for peace. So I'd like to ask, if you'd like to have a show of hands, how many of you have a practice of mindfulness meditation or its equivalent, or mindful movement like yoga, tai chi, qigong, mindful swimming, self-care? Well, congratulations. Y'all are doing really well. Okay, thank you very much. So if you do, I hope that you know that one of the most basic forms of self-care that, and the reason that I'm going to emphasize this evening is because sometimes we don't have access to yoga or to swimming or to qigong or to mindfulness meditation instruction for various reasons. But one of the most basic forms of self-care that is always available to us anytime and anywhere could be for most of us, because there is no one size fits all, but could be for many of us, mindful awareness of the breath. I think that awareness of the breath is always one of the best forms of medicine that we can give ourselves, or it can be if we develop it in a certain way, if we learn to take joy in awareness of the breath. And so we're going to be doing that and invited to do that with each other tonight. The breath is so common, we may not be aware of it at every moment, and it is miraculous. I say this from the point of view of being a mother and of having seen, I have one child, he's a little over 25 now, and having seen that and heard that first breath. It is one of the most miraculous, amazing experiences of the human being, I feel. And for the human being that is inside the body of the parent and does not need to breathe with lungs to emerge into the world of light and sound and gravity and the world that we've all been living in as adults for a good long time now, just breathing away, breathing 24/7. But there was a moment, I know, for each one of you where you took that very first breath. I know that. And it was a miracle. So this may sound too simple and too good to be true, yet it is simple, it is good, and it is true in my experience as a longtime Buddhist meditator. So if it feels okay to you, let's take some mindful breaths together right now. Let's increase our awareness that we're breathing. And I also want to acknowledge that if for some of us, for any reason, that increasing the mindfulness of breathing may cause painful or disturbing feelings to arise, some kind of painful mass of suffering, that what I recommend is, and you can read about it actually online, that there's a technique called touch and go, in which we just mindfully, we're just aware, oh, something painful is rising up for me, and then we're going to back off from it. We're not going to intensely keep focusing on it. So we're just touching it, we're backing off from it, and then the invitation is on the out breath, when we breathe out, to try to just let go of as much tension as possible, to the extent that we can. It might be a little, it might be more, but just be conscious of it. Just have that intention to just let some stuff that we've been carrying around go on the out breath. All right, so we're just going to increase, hopefully, our mindful awareness of the physical sensations of the breath. So let's start that by standing, if you would like to do so, and if you're able, you can, however, remain sitting. And at this point, I'm going to stand, and so let me see if I can maybe point the mic up a little bit. If this gets lost on the recording, I apologize, but we're here now, so. So I'll invite you to place one hand, it doesn't matter which one, just lightly on your abdomen or tummy area, the other one on your upper chest. So we're not pressing in. Again, that's exactly that same kind of lightness, kindness, that kind touch, just very light. And close your eyes if you like, or keep them slightly open if you don't want to close them. And we're just going to take some deep breaths in and out. So breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and out. And breathe in and breathe out. Now just take a moment, if you like, and make a mental note of what you've noticed as you've breathed in and out in terms of what's happened in your body, what you feel in your body, and maybe what moved or what didn't move in this very simple exercise. And now if you like, open your eyes, and I invite you to take one finger, it doesn't matter which, place it lightly under your nose, and we're just going to take a number of deep breaths. Breathe in and out through the nose. In, out, in, and out. And then finally, this comes from my friend who's a martial arts master, John W. Ellis IV. We sometimes teach meditation and movement at East Bay Meditation Center, and we've done it at other places as well. And that's, here we're going to then add on the hands, some hand movements. And what the hands do is they'll actually help us to track where the in-breath begins, the duration of the in-breath as it rises, then at a certain point the in-breath ends, the out-breath begins, and as we breathe out, the hands are falling. So we don't have to get all kind of uptight about it. We're just going to do it in an easy, relaxed way and see if you notice whether your observation of the particulars of the breath increases even a little. So breathing in, hands float up. Deep breath in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Invite in feelings of wellness and well-being. Breathing in, wellness and well-being. Breathing out, letting go of tension, pain, sorrow, suffering. Another time, breathing in, well-being, smile, and breathe out, letting go of tension the best we can. Okay, thank you. So maybe with the mic, I'd like to invite just a few comments to ask what you noticed in any of those breathing exercises. And I'm specifically asking for physical sensations, what physical sensations you might have noticed. Yes?
I've done mind imagery.
Could you speak into the mic, and that way we'll get it on the recording?
Yeah, I've done mind imagery, and, it wasn't the same. I feel as though that was a breakthrough for me, I felt like this release come upon me, and with mind imagery, it's not the same. It's like mind imagery shows like you use your mind in different places, but this was like just right there, you know. So I think that I might try that more.
Okay, thanks. And I'm specifically looking for sensations in the body. Did you notice some parts of your body moving? How did they move? Yeah.
With every breath that I did take, when releasing, I could feel the tension leaving my body. I can feel my shoulders relaxing a little bit more.
Okay, thanks. That's what I'm looking for. You can feel your shoulders drop?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. We're getting real simple here, folks, actually. Because mindfulness is very simple. It's so simple we kind of ignore it. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt tingling, and it kind of is in my face right now. So I guess some cheese moving and flowing.
Okay, so
like
tingling in the face.
Yeah.
Thank you. So notice how simple we're getting. We're not even interpreting any of this. So when I breathe in, I'll notice it's very common. I feel my tummy or belly puffing up. Do you feel that? Breathe in and breathe out. You see the hands going out and down. If you watch a baby breathing before they get like all inhibited and everything, just watch a baby breathing when it's sleeping. You'll see that tummy going up and down. It's beautiful. It's like the ocean, up and down. Yes.
I felt a kind of settling, and I really didn't take that many breaths because I was using the restroom, but when I came out, because I was standing up and I wanted to take a really deep breath, and when I breathed out, I felt kind of like a settling.
I'm noticing you're using your hands,
Yeah.
so it's that settling down.
It's like a settling, sometimes I know when I'm stressed out, I'm like this. Like I'm ready to be an astronaut or something, But a settling is like, okay, I settle down.
Okay, so I'm seeing that this movement is associated with a lot of energy, maybe tension, and that this is settling down, that release. Yes. How about the finger under the nose? Did you notice anything? When you breathe in and breathe out, is there a difference? There may be that. How about temperature? Do you notice anything in terms of temperature? Pardon? Heat. Heat on both the in-breath and the out-breath? Yes. Typically, that's what people are going to notice. There's often a cooling sensation in the nostrils on the in-breath. The air is warmed by the body on the out-breath. So mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the breath, we're breaking it down, folks. We're going to get so simple. We're going to just notice warmth, coolness, tingling, numbness, rising, falling, expanding, contracting. So you notice there's just no fancy interpretation there. We're getting very, very basic, and that's actually the secret of mindfulness, is that we're starting to just be able to drop off a lot of that thinking that we're always doing, and we're just tuning into our body in a way that encourages connectivity, that encourages our own wish for our own well-being, and that encourages relaxation, self-healing, and release. So in this case, I'm going to propose that by practicing mindfulness of breathing to not burn out and to take care of ourselves as agents of change, that what we're doing is actually a radical act. It's a radical act of creating a completely portable, invisible, inexpensive, lovely, and even rather fabulous home for ourselves, no matter how low income we may be. Because we can always come home to the breath when we learn mindful awareness of breathing. The breath can be our home anytime and anywhere. So we're connecting to the simplest, the most sacred, the most vital way, in the most vital way to our living and breathing bodies. And through this awareness of body and breath, we connect directly to each and every ancestor that each one of us has, because we are the result of that line of ancestors, both biological, spiritual, and everyone who has come before us, of which we are the result. And when we do this, we, I think, don't even have to use the words peace or self-care, because we're already there. Mindfulness of the breath is an inherently creative act, and it is literally inspirational, because inspire means to breathe in, right? Inspiration, that has to do with the breath. My original background was in the arts. That's what led me into meditation through the door of Zen Buddhism. And I stayed with the spiritual life, even going so far as to go through monastic training, because I found it to be a life that was creative, that had the possibility of that very basic kind of joy in it. I'm not always going to be in a place where I have time or energy or the ability to sit down and write poetry. Do I always have time to become mindful of the breath? Yes. Does it cost me anything? Do I have to buy canvases and expensive paints or video cameras or computer software to edit movies? No. I can be creative simply by being mindful of the breath. So in ending, let's go back for a moment to how can we practice self-care so that we can stick around for as long as possible with as much well-being, happiness, joy, and energy as possible to do our work. So sometimes people will say things like, for self-care, I'm going to take a long hot bath, or I'm going to walk in nature, I'm going to listen to my favorite music, I'm going to plan a wonderful vacation, I'm going to go to the gym and work out, and these things and more may all well be, they're all very good for us. And what I'm proposing is that we think about developing a practice of mindfulness in all of this, starting with the mindfulness of the breath, which is one of the foundations in my spiritual tradition of 2,600 years of wisdom practices. So that if things get very intense, which sometimes they do, there may be times in our lives, for instance, when we experience in a very short time period or even simultaneously multiple deaths, losses, very grievous, injurious events that take place. So if we hit a period where it's really what my kid calls a rough patch, things get very intense. For some of us, that may have gone on for years. And we don't have the money, we don't have the time or resources to go somewhere else for stress reduction. Then this loving, beautiful, familiar, warm, and refreshing form of self-healing is immediately available to us. Mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of the breath. We can practice returning to that simple awareness. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. I'm aware of the intention to breathe in well-being and healing. I'm aware of the intention to let go of stress, of tension, of sorrow, and of suffering as I breathe out. It's as simple as that. So we can practice returning to this home when we're walking, riding the bus, waiting in the dentist office, washing dishes, going to sleep, waking up, anytime and anywhere. Inviting with it a sense of joy, of ease, and of spaciousness. We can ask ourselves the question, what can I do to make each breath more pleasant, more enjoyable, and to release more stress as I'm breathing. Because when we inspire ourselves, when we breathe in and out with awareness, we can also ask to what extent we're contributing to the revolution, and that's our evolution that veteran activist Grace Lee Boggs, there was a quote from her on the slideshow, talks about, in which we're reimagining the work, the education, and the very fabric of our everyday lives, our children's lives, the lives of our elders. She talks about it as an act of imagination, as an act of creativity. Can we actually imagine a new way of being that will be good for each and every one of us, leaving out no one, equally good for all of us, for the next generations and for the earth? So I'm going to end there, and we can have some time for your insights, your questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can. And once again, I want to thank you really from the bottom of my heart for the work that each of you is doing to create more justice, more healing, more joy in our society and in the world. So thank you. We have the mic available, and we'd like to hear from you. Particularly those who haven't spoken yet, I'd invite them to speak first. I do see a hand in the back. If you like, you're welcome to share your first name with us. You can also pass it.
I'm Jameer Grigsby. The main thing that I got from it, what I liked the most was the breathing. That was like very relaxing. I never really paid so much attention to like how much breathing could be so relaxing, like and releasing all the tension, especially closing my eyes too, because that kind of like helped. When you're opening your eyes, you're like thinking too much about everything. But when I closed my eyes and just like breathed, that kind of made me feel good. So I don't know, that was good. That's what I liked.
Thank you. And did it cost you $1 million? Hey, all right. Yeah. So. Thank you so much. Exactly.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia. I enjoy the breathing. I do exercise, so I do a lot of breathing because you have to breathe to run and do all that kind of stuff. But what I have a problem with in just trying to find a way to be mindful in that is calming my mind down in order to take in breath. Because I find as I'm trying to breathe in all the good thoughts, I have all this extra noise going on with stressful thoughts. How do you taper that?
Thank you. Thanks for asking that question. So I'm just going to offer you one of the most simple and basic techniques, and that is as you breathe in, to silently say the word in, and as you breathe out, to silently say the word out. And what we're doing there is we're actually making an intervention on all of those thoughts that are just wildly generating out of our brains. That's one of the function of the brains. But we can just wear ourselves out with all that thinking, right? So as we breathe in, we're silently, and you can do it while exercising. Breathing in, breathing out, out. In, out. The other words that we might use are, if we're noticing the feeling of the breath in the chest and the abdomen area, we can use the words rising, rising, falling, rising, falling. So do you notice that that's pointing us to getting back into the body? Yes, yeah. It's pointing our attention on the fact that we're in this body that's expanding and rising as we breathe in, and that's gently subsiding as we breathe out, which will become even stronger if we're exercising aerobically, because the body is really working, right? So give it a try.
Good evening. My name is Ron. I'm kind of the same way. I'll stand up.
Yeah, we want to see you, Ron.
All right. I'm
Thanks.
kind of the same way where my mind's always all over the place. So I'm either daydreaming or I'm just thinking of so many things, and I have to constantly like bring myself back to like home in on your voice to like, okay, you're not paying attention again. So I have to like constantly just come back to the room, and that's typically like my battle throughout the day. And I'm just being more aware of it just because of you know, sharing us the knowledge here, and that's pretty much what I'm getting right now.
Thank you. Once again, thank you so much, Ron, because that's something that we, to some extent, all experience, and that is why, mindfulness and self-care is something that we need to pay attention to over and over. And I just want to normalize for you that having the mind leap here and leap wildly there is completely something that everyone experiences. And we can actually, over time, the more that we pay attention and we become mindful of that gentle rhythm of the breath, and we become actually more used to the simplicity of it, because we can get, at least I can get really addicted to things becoming more and more complex. Like one thought leads to another thought, which cascades to maybe 5 more thoughts, right? And then they zoom off in different directions. And it actually has a kind of psychedelic, pleasing quality to it. You know, it's really colorful, and there are just sparks and fireworks. In the meantime, I'm wearing myself out completely. So it takes a while to actually become appreciative of just the simplicity of allowing ourselves to even settle down, and even maybe giving ourselves permission to do it, because we live in a highly overstimulated society, right? Everyone's always like, you're talking to your friend, and you're driving, and maybe you're looking at texts on your cell phone when you hit the stoplight, and then you're thinking about the grocery store and maybe going to Trader Joe's later on, and then you think about all these other things, and that's actually kind of encouraged. But for those of us for whom we can see we're just not that productive, and we get so frantic when we think that way, we can try something else. And the idea is we keep returning home. Think of the breath as your mindfulness of the breath as your home. It's kind of nice to go home at the end of a long day, I hope. Or should be. Home should be a place where we go to refresh ourselves and where we like to go. So make it pleasurable. Thank you.
Yes. I wasn't here for the beginning part. I apologize. Are you a social activist, social justice activist?
Yes, I am.
I was reading about John Rawls, a philosopher, Western philosopher here in the United States.
John Rawls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Well, he wrote a book called The Theory of Justice. And I was wondering, had you talked about that this evening, or?
No, I didn't, but now that you've mentioned it, I'll put it on my reading list. Thank you.
No, about the social justice. Have you mentioned anything about that tonight here?
Yes.
Have you? Oh, okay.
Yes, I was just acknowledging that the folks who have gathered here tonight, it's my understanding that since the topic of this presentation is mindfulness, justice, and social change. Is that it?
Yes.
Mindfulness, self-care, and social change for social justice activists and change agents, that I've acknowledged that I know that folks in this room are dealing with issues having to do with justice, and justice, when we say justice, that always brings along with it the constructions and awareness, the analysis and strategies having to deal with oppression, power, and privilege.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. And there was a hand up here.
Thank you. Yeah, I once was listening to a Zen teacher. His name is Shinsen Young, and I listened to a beginning meditation tape by him, and this seemed to really help me a lot when I was really starting to practice, how shall I say, on a regular basis. And one of the things that he talked about was using the breath with relaxing the body, using the breath as a way of relaxing the body. And he would say, in the beginning, breathing, when I breathe in, notice when I breathe in that maybe the right side of the body is kind of raised a little bit. And then when I'm breathing out, notice how it settles. And then do the same thing with the left side. And then the back side. And then the front side. And then the whole thing. And it was very relaxing, actually. But it was an interesting way to use the breath, so that the breath is, it's the breathing in, the breathing out by itself is very wonderful. But also there are many other ways to use the breath as well. So
absolutely. So what I hear you saying is the technique is to become aware of the breath in different parts of the body. Like the front part, the back part. We could be aware of the breath in the throat, in the nose. Yeah. As awareness becomes more subtle. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Denise. Hi, everyone. I'm going to try to formulate my question, but I'm having a difficult time wrapping my mind around it. I'm having a really difficult year with confrontation, negative interactions with other people. It's happening way too often, and I'm wondering about this idea of mindfulness, if it could include also being mindful, being aware of those negative emotions, negative reactions to other people, and I wonder if you could speak to that. Is there a tip you can give around becoming aware of these emotions and doing something with them, or is it bad to notice them versus trying to pretend that they're not there or push them away? Or
I don't believe pushing anything away is ever helpful. I mean, we do, that's an excellent question, and we do need, as adults, we know that we need to have certain social filters on our behaviors, particularly those of us who've raised children. I mean, that's a lot of what socialization is, that there are appropriate ways to express things, there are appropriate social ways to move our bodies or not, and that will vary from culture to culture and from situation to situation. So that having been said, choosing to refrain from doing something is not the same as pushing it down or suppressing it, I would say. And suppressing something is kind of like whack-a-mole. Once you press something down in one place, it's just going to rise up in another. I think that's just going to be a law of physics. So pushing something down, maybe not so useful or great. So dealing with people that we find difficult, definitely we're going to want to use the mindfulness, so that kind of very neutral, spacious awareness that we started out by with very basically applying it to the breath. We can also apply it to looking in and just kind of, we're noticing. So notice the tone of voice I'm using. It's kind of like, So, irritation is arising. That would be a mindful way of noting an emotion. And you notice I'm not saying, I'm irritated because you did this or that. Once again, we're going to back off from that. We're just going to really break it down. We're going to make it so simple. And just notice that this thing we call irritation, which usually has a physical sensation and some thoughts arising with it, like you're the most annoying person in the world. How could I have ended up in the same room with you? Well, that must be my fate, because See, those are the thoughts. Those are called thoughts. So we're going to just back off from that. We're just going to notice, a lot of irritation is arising, or it could be anger is arising, or it could be boredom is arising. And when we become more aware of what's going on inside of ourselves, then it's a little bit interesting and miraculous. Many people, myself included, find that just becoming aware, the mindfulness itself already contains the seeds within it of knowing what we need to do that will be most beneficial. Right? Yeah, in other words, it triggers our own wisdom. It helps our own wisdom to come out. Because a lot of us have that wisdom, and we pretty much often know what we need to do. I certainly do, if I would only listen to myself more. So it's that really going down to that very kind of precise noting. Try it and see. I mean, this is all experiential. It has to be tried in the moment.
Hi, Mushim. Thank you for sharing tonight. My name is Wendy Schlater. I'm from the La Jolla Band of Listeño Indians Avelica program, and so we deal a lot with violence against our women, and we hear a lot of the women's stories in the community that we're related to or that we're on a sister reservation and things like that. And so, and I know that you're in a similar position of listening to a lot of people's stories. And so when you're listening to someone's story and they're telling it to you, it can sometimes trigger an emotion inside of you. So what are some of the things, and I think you answered part of it when she asked her question and you answered it, but like some of those emotions that come up, like what are some of the ways that you deal with those triggered emotions to put them back on the shelf so that you can be present in that moment with that person and not disservice them because all of a sudden it becomes about you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wendy. That's, I would say a couple of things because from my own experience, and one is that we do want to be fully present for the person whose story we're hearing, and we can also make a note that it has brought up a lot of feeling for ourselves that we want to look at later on. So it's not that we're necessarily even letting go of it altogether, as much as saying, that's something that I actually might want to look at later on. And maybe later on, actually our feeling has changed and we don't need to or want to, but maybe we do. However, in the moment, as you're pointing out, what I would say is that what I notice is that when I'm having a reaction that begins to make it more about me than being present and witnessing what the person is saying, which that kind of deep listening is already one of the most, I'm sure you know, healing actions that we can offer to one another. And once again, it's something that it's a skill we can all build. Kids can develop it, and I hope they do, that we're spreading that with our younger folk. And it doesn't cost anything. It's our time, it's our compassionate hearts, it's our loving kindness. It doesn't cost any money to offer that form of healing to each other. So what I notice is if I'm having a reaction, it's almost like a tightening, it's kind of like a contraction, where I begin to really go in and to feel like I'm having my own thoughts, I'm having my own reaction, my own story is starting to come up, and it blocks my ability to hear the other person's story. So I think of it as almost a kind of a tightening and a contraction. And what I try to do is just notice that and then create a lot of space around it. I'll visualize or I'll create a feeling space in which there's more expansiveness, there's more expansion. So it's not that point of tension or that knot of contraction is going away. It's just that it's within now the context of something that's really much larger, creating a sense of space. Is that helpful? Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's actually a shift of perspective, because if we get too, I'll just say I'll use an I statement, if I get really obsessed, say with some little spot on my skin, that it begins to look larger and more frightening. And even if I know it's something that is totally harmless, it just looks worse and worse and worse, and I become more and more tense. Where if I'm able to actually look at the bigger picture, everything's fine. So it's that big picture view. We could call it the view. Mm-hmm. So we have about 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Mushim. My name's Stephanie, and I'm also having trouble formulating my question. But I guess I was thinking about how this topic of social change, and I think many of us are in here and working on systemic change and trying to create this world that will be good for all of us. And I'm thinking of Thich Nhat Hanh often talking about not running after fame or fortune or accumulating things. And I find myself when I hear him say that, but Ty, I'm not running after fame and fortune, I'm just trying to pay my bills. And it's so hard in this society and the systems that we're in the moment that many of us are trying to change. It's like we have to run and work really hard just to make basic ends meet. And as I was trying to formulate this question, I kind of came back to this notion that maybe self-care is a form of resistance to the system. If the system inherently sort of is burning you out, that self-care is a way we could actually resist the system. But then there's still the issue of maybe having to work too many hours to pay your rent. So I don't know if there's a question in there, but I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I absolutely feel I hear you and I identify with what you're saying. The reminder again of the famous Audre Lorde quote is obviously going in the direction of what we're saying. We are in systems that, for many of us, dictate extreme overwork and a feeling that we're always just scrambling around, trying to pay the bills, trying to survive, trying to make ends meet, in which case it's extremely difficult to be able to pull back from that without things falling apart, to make, first of all, an analysis, our own analysis of our relationship to these systems, and also to connect to others and to understand what our strategy is on our relationship to movements and to strategies for change. What's our place? In other words, what can we contribute with our time, our life energy, amidst our circumstances? Some of us may be taking care of parents, some of us may be taking care of younger children, some of us both. That's called being sandwiched. Working jobs that are underpaid, working all of these things that I think that you're talking about. So what I would say this is just my own method, I'm just talking from my own experience, is that look at what you can let go and look at what you can't let go. So I will tell you very frankly that I have lived in a very small apartment, 1-bedroom apartment in Oakland. It's rent controlled. It's in a fairly kind of peaceful, quiet area that has good access to public transportation, and it's a good location for 23 years now, and it's pretty much a mess. It is, because I discovered that by frantically always trying to keep things kind of in what my idea would be, that it would be like very highly ordered and it would look all clean and it would look all great, then I just became more and more distraught, actually, and I wasn't able to do the things and be part of, go to the meetings, the organizing meetings that I wanted to do, the reading that I wanted to do, even if it was in bits and snatches. And so I actually let a lot of stuff go that is even very distressing to other people when they visit me. I had one person actually who's a professional house cleaner volunteer to give me 16 hours of their professional time in four-hour blocks to clean up my space. But having to organize for him to come in and clean it up was too much trouble, so I didn't want to even waste the time on that. So I'm not saying that we should all live in a mess, because I do have to have some organization. I'm just saying we can very carefully look at even very tiny ways that we might give up some things that where the world isn't going to end. Maybe people will judge us, but who cares? And just reclaim that time and space for yourself and do something that's creative and do something that you know is a contribution, no matter how small, to the social change that we desperately need. Okay? Thank you. So thank you all so very much for welcoming me to San Diego. Oh, one more? Okay.
I'm sorry, is that okay if we ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay. My name is Brian. One of the barriers for self-care for me is the presence of, sometimes I experience the presence of persistent, and I suppose you could use the term violent, self-destructive thought that's very difficult to offer intervention to internally. And what suggestions might you have, for instance, maybe language, one could say with breath, or different techniques that could possibly be interventions for that mode of thinking that takes me away from self-care?
So what I'm understanding and hearing is violent and self-destructive thoughts.
Yes.
Okay, that's again so common. So what I'm going to do now, so that we'll end our time together, is to invite us all to do a very brief, it's called the meditation on goodwill. And this is something that I share with the students in my practice in transformative action. And it consists of repeating certain phrases to ourselves, which you can adapt in any way that you like, and which we're actually wishing good will to ourselves and to others. It's sometimes called loving kindness. The alternate translation, which I think is better, is actually goodwill, or maybe even universal friendliness. So in other words, even if we're not there yet, we're going to plant seeds to cultivate an attitude of goodwill and kindness towards ourselves and others that is going to begin to grow and take up the space that was formerly occupied by the self-destructive thoughts. So it's almost like planting a garden where we're planting vegetables and flowers that we like, that are delightful, that are nutritious, and as they become stronger and start to grow, what happens? They're filling up the garden, right? And that leaves less room for the destructive weeds to grow. So we're actually not even removing anything, we're just emphasizing and placing our attention on that which is beneficial. So let's just do that. We're going to do the brief version of it with appreciation for the goodness in our hearts. So I invite you to just take a moment, relax. If you like, close your eyes. If not, keep them slightly open. In any case, we're directing the attention inward, and we're recognizing our fundamental goodness, just our really basic goodness. If you can't feel it, know that I believe it's there in you, and I feel it for you. And so do others as well. But hopefully you can feel it. And just relax, let that tension out to the extent that you can. And then with these words or any others, silently repeat in your mind these expressions of goodwill, starting with ourselves. May I be safe and protected from harm, physical harm and mental harm. So in other words, may I be safe from danger, from harm. May I be strong and may I be healthy. So you notice we're not saying, I will be strong, I will be healthy if we're ill. We're just wishing ourselves to gain the maximum wellness that we can in our own circumstances. And maybe that shift can be a little, maybe it can be a lot. May I be strong and healthy. May I be peaceful. May I be happy. May I live my life with joy and with ease. And turning these wishes of goodwill outward towards everyone in this room, because you took some of your precious human life, your time, your energy, and you came here, you participated. Some of you may have taken a vow to not burn out. I hope you have. And to everyone in this room, may you be safe and may you always be protected from harm, physical harm and mental harm. May you be strong. May you be healthy. May you be peaceful, and may you be deeply and truly happy. May you know happiness, and may you know the causes of happiness so that you can bring more happiness to yourself and others. And may you live your life with joy and with ease. And finally, spreading these well wishes, this goodwill out from this room in the Malcolm X Library on October 31st, 2014, in every direction, to the north and south, east, west, northeast, southeast, northwest and southwest, and in the direction above and in the direction below, spreading outward from this room, across San Diego, and across the entire planet, outward even into space, and touching the many worlds that we might see, that we cannot see, that we might imagine, that we might not imagine, and spreading backward into the past and forward into the future. May each and every being be well and happy. May they be safe. May they be protected from harm and danger. May they be peaceful. May they be joyous. May all beings be well and happy. And opening the eyes gently if they've been closed, with appreciation for ourselves and others, I thank each and every one of you.